Yo, what is up, guys? MattWic here. We are back, NHL 25, and we are finally going to be starting our first realistic rebuild here with the Calgary Flames. In my opinion, one of the hardest, if not the hardest, rebuild that you can do to kick off NHL 25. So in this episode, we're just going to be taking a look at the team, our prospects, our picks, our coaching staff, our scouts. I already did a little bit of housekeeping just because I don't want to make this video too long. But one of the big things I wanted to do before we get started in this was I wanted to get your guys' opinions and suggestions on just like different rules we can kind of implement in here to make this as realistic of a rebuild as possible. Obviously, I know we're not going to be doing any trade cheesing, really any contract cheesing, anything of that sort, just to try to make this like I said, as realistic as we can. So let me know in the comments any suggestions that you might have, any rules that I can implement on myself. I'm already going to be doing some with, like I said, with the realistic trades. I'll show you guys the settings that we're going to be rocking in with here throughout this rebuild. So obviously injuries are going to be off just because I don't want to deal with the constant in and out of the lineup. So there will be that. But let me know if you guys have had good experiences so far with the injuries being on in the GM modes. Other than that, we do have the auto goalie rotate, everything we're going to do on our own. This I'm going to turn down just because if I play a couple games, I don't want the penalties to be insane. Sim scoring engine we're going to have on medium, draft class and prospect quality we're going to have on high, just because of my experiences in NHL 24. Once you get super far into the GM modes, the quality of rosters can get really bad, especially with the defensemen. If you haven't seen that, go check out some of those NHL 24 videos towards the end. I think like 78 overall defensemen were getting paid like $7-8 million just because there were no defensive prospects. Sim engine scoring or shot frequency at high. Trade difficulty I do have at hard, just to make, like I said, the trades as realistic as possible. Everything else is pretty normal here. Morale meetings, I did turn the morale off for this one just so we can move by it a little bit quicker, but let me know if we want to maybe turn that on, or if, like I said, if that's why I'm doing this one before, so we can go back, restart, do anything there. But those are the settings that we're going to be rocking with. Let's take a look at the starting lineup that we have here. And I know Calgary right now in real life, starting off the season hot, 3-0 so far throughout their first 3 games, so looking really good. However, in NHL 24, or NHL 25, I should say, they do not sim very well. So they are a pretty bad team, not looking to get any better, at least in the game. Now, in my opinion, I do think they have a chance in that division. I think it's a little bit more wide open than people would think. So we'll see if they're a team that's maybe able to contend for one of those top 3 spots, or maybe even a wild card if that division does end up being maybe a little bit weaker, like I said, than people think. I think people were a little high on the Oilers, forgot what happened at the beginning of last year. They got a big bump from that coaching change. So we'll see. They're already off to a rough start. I looked up McDavid's -5. So we'll see if they can bounce back, or if they're going to have a similar start like last year, maybe a little Stanley Cup Finals hangover. For the rosters, guys, I am using Vasi's latest update. His rosters have always been pretty solid. I know sometimes he can get a little bit crazy with the draft classes in terms of prospects. He can make them a little bit too good, but just for the most part, I think they're some of the better rosters out there, and they're definitely better than EA's rosters. So we'll rock with those, at least for this first franchise, and then see what we think after this one. Maybe for our next one, we do a different one or anything like that. But this is our roster for day 1 here. Definitely not a Stanley Cup contender in my mind. I got Popsel in there is the only change I made to the day 1 roster. Just put him in there just so he can maybe develop into a mid-80s guy that can maybe be useful to us down the road when we are ready to maybe contend. But other than that, a lot of these guys aren't going to be on the roster. Connor Zary, he's another guy that I'd like to develop up to a little bit higher, make him a second, third line center at least of the future. So we'll see what can happen there. The only guys I'm really thinking about trading, especially year 1, is Andrei Kuzmenko. He's got 1 year left and a modified no trade clause, so he's definitely movable and a decent overall. So a team would definitely be looking to get him. Another guy, Anthony Mantha, is a guy I'd look to trade. 1 year deal, modified no trade clause as well. So it's not like they have full no move clauses like Kadri and Huberdeau, which that's another thing I wanted to get your guys' opinion on. Possibly looking at moving these guys. Like, should I ask them, hey, do you want to waive your no move clause, possibly move to a new team? Definitely not this year, maybe not even next year, but maybe in 2026, 27. I think as well with Kadri, that's when we're able to move him, so that's definitely something we'll look at there, because his overall from the other GM modes I've done, it does tank pretty quickly and it does turn into a pretty bad contract. But I don't know if you guys, like I said, let me know if that seems realistic enough. Obviously, there's always teams looking to get a guy who's won a Stanley Cup, maybe fill in as a third, fourth line guy. So that's something we can look at. But definitely, like I said, not until his no move clause and no trade clauses are up. And that's another thing that I want to set to, is if a guy has a no trade clause or a no move clause, really don't want to go about asking him if he wants to waive it. I know in real life, like, hey, teams always do that sometimes. Go to a guy, hey, do you want to get out of here? Go to a Stanley Cup contender. They say yes. Huberdeau definitely be a contender for that with not having a Stanley Cup. So that's definitely something that, you know, maybe as he starts to get more up there in age, as we're not winning, maybe he does want to move on or would want to move on. Or maybe he'd want to stick around with the young team, mentor some guys, which is definitely a role that we could have for him. Sharon Govich here, 1 year left, and it looks like an extension kicks in after that, but he's someone I'll hold on to just to see if he can stick around long enough to be with us when we're ready to win a cup. In terms of defense, I did put Kevin Ball in the lineup to see if we can develop him a little bit more to get him to where he could be a guy that we have there for a cup run in maybe 4 or 5 years. Uyghur and Rasmus Anderson are guys I'm going to have stick around just because they're high overall. They're not super old. Contracts aren't the best. 7 years, excuse me, for $6 million is not bad. And then same here with Rasmus Anderson. Definitely deals that we could move if we want to. But I like having some veterans around just so, like, you know, they can mentor the guys, even though I know it's not a thing in the game. It really doesn't matter if you have veterans around, but just like I said, just for the realistic aspect of it, we'll stick with those guys there. But in goalie, this is where it gets a little rough, and especially throughout the entire organization. You know, we have some prospects, we have a lot of picks, but we do not have any goaltenders. So we have Dustin Wolf, who's 81 overall, 23 years of age. Maybe he can turn into somebody who we can use down the road, but we'll see. Dan Vladar is definitely not somebody who's going to be with us too long. Scratched, nobody really of note here. A lot of older guys who were lower overalls. In terms of the AHL, now one thing we do have a decent couple prospects, a decent pool of prospects, and a decent couple prospects that could play in the NHL pretty soon. So Coronado's definitely a guy, like I said, once I move on from Mantha and Kuzmenko, probably in the middle of the season, we'll bring up Coronado to fill in that top 6 and get him some minutes there. Big thing I don't like is filling in guys who are like snipers or playmakers at young ages on the 4th line, just because I feel like that hurts them more than it does good. Peltier is another guy. I'd like to maybe see him get maybe 2 overall higher, and then we'll put him in the NHL. So we'll see what happens with that. Maybe move Zari up, put him on the 3rd line, and then go from there. But Honzik is a guy who definitely looks like he could be a stud, a possible, I'd say top end for him would be like a 2nd line center, if not maybe a very good defensive 3rd line center. So we'll see how he develops. Rory Kearns is a guy who 22 years of age, 70 overall right now, not expecting a whole lot out of him. Jaden Lipinski, 19 years of age, definitely wanted to make sure I get him in the lineup so he can start developing. He's a guy who could also fill that role of like a 2nd, 3rd line center, maybe even a right wing down the road. So we'll see what happens with that. Defensively, we do have a couple of prospects. Kuznetsov here, 74 overall, looks like he could turn into a good maybe 3rd pairing defenseman. Solyov, 24 years of age, we'll see. Poirier is a guy who could definitely get up there and be a top 4 defenseman if we develop him right. And then we have Grishnikov and Brustowicz here as well. Hopefully I got those names right. As you guys know, I'm normally terrible with names, so apologies if I mispronounce anything. You can always correct me in the comments below. But they look like they could make it as NHL defensemen. They got a lot of years to develop, 69 overall, so we'll see what we can get done with them. Like I said, in terms of goaltending, even in the AHL, it's not very good. These guys aren't going to develop up to be NHL goaltenders anytime soon. And then scratched, we do have, let me see, a couple guys. Ignat Jew. I thought this guy's name was insane. Walteri Ignat Jew. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I do not know. I've never heard of him before. But let's see. Any other guys here? Parker Bell, maybe a guy that we get into the lineup, 20 years of age. What's his potential? Medium, top 9. Yeah, that's definitely a guy I'll pop into the lineup. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. So Bell will put in the lineup and get him squared away there. We do have some prospects that are still in the system, not necessarily on the NHL or AHL roster, so I'll show you guys that as well. Obviously, Zane Perique, I'll look up the exact pronunciation of that name as well, just because he looks like he's going to be one of our stud defensemen for a long time to come. Obviously being a 9th overall pick, so he should be very, very nice. Medium elite potential, 71 overall. So hopefully we'll see him sooner rather than later in the next maybe like 2-3 years. And then we do have some other prospects who are throughout. So a decent system right now. I'm not too upset with it. I think we got a lot to work with here, and then we can easily turn this around. Like I said, in 3 to 5 years, we can look to maybe be making the playoffs or competing for a Stanley Cup if we do get lucky. In the trades, I'll go to this just so you guys can see our draft picks. We do have a decent pool of draft picks, which should get better as we look to trade some of those guys. So we have 2 first-round picks this year and 2 second-round picks, which we will definitely put to good use. And then we have 2 first-round picks and 2 third-round picks in the next year's draft. So I'll definitely look to maybe add a second-round pick with one of those guys, Kuzmenko or Mantha, for next year, or maybe possibly get a first-round pick mid-year if those guys have high enough trade value, which I don't think they would, especially on hard difficulty. I think the most we'll get for Kuzmenko is probably a second. Mantha, we're probably looking at maybe like a 3rd and a 7th for him, which I think would be reasonable. You know, teams looking to contend for a cup would shell that out for a player that can maybe fill a bottom 6 role or possibly slide into a second line role. So we'll see what happens with that, but definitely look up to bolster up that trade pool that we have, or draft pick pool for down the road, so we can start stockpiling prospects like crazy. But guys, that's going to be the end of this video. Obviously, I already did the assigned scout. I guess one other thing I'll show real quick is our coaching staff. We didn't get very good luck with our head coach, B overall, C teaching, so we'll probably look on moving from him after this year or next year. I do have owner mode turned off, so we should be able to go crazy in terms of hiring whatever coach and scouts we want. But I definitely want to get a coach with a better teaching stat, especially if we're going to have a very young team here in a couple of years. So guys, let me know your thoughts. Like I said, any suggestions that we should do to maybe put some limitations on ourselves that the game doesn't, to keep this as realistic as possible. But I hope you enjoyed. Next video, we'll probably get 2 seasons done, a couple drafts, and we'll move this a little bit faster than we do the testing the draft one, just because, like I said, we're not going to be good for a couple years, so I don't want to bore you guys with a lot of simulation of a team that's just going to miss the playoffs. So I'll bring you in maybe for end of season wrap-ups, so show you how guys are developing, do the draft, and then we'll go through that again for a couple years until we maybe start competing for a playoff spot. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Make sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel for more NHL 25 content. I'm pretty sure this series is going to be a banger, so definitely make sure you hit that subscribe button. But thanks for watching. That's the end of this one. Peace.